but I needed to talk to someone. So I rang my therapist. Thank God she answered. He says he apologized for the intrusion and told her that he didn't know who else to call. And he told her he'd had a fight with Willie. And William had knocked him to the floor. I looked down and told her that my shirt was ripped. And my necklace was broken. We'd had a million physical fights in our lives. As boys, we'd done nothing but fight. But this felt different somehow. Well, yeah, it is different. Because you made this one up. Hello, how are you? Welcome to another episode of I'll Spare You the Details, where we are going through Prince Harry's Spare, section by section. We are very close to being done. When we're done with this, we're going to go through Revenge. And then when we're done with Revenge, I think we're going to take a break from royal stuff and do a different memoir. But we still have lots of royal stuff coming, if that's why you're here at this channel. Before we get into the episode, I just want to say I have steadily been losing my voice over the last 2 days. And then I just read to my kids for 30 minutes before they went to bed. And so my already sad little voice is even more annoying right now. I might have to cut the episode short if it's just so grating and annoying that even I can't handle it. All day long, my voice has been cracking and disappearing. So hopefully it's not too annoying, but we'll see. All right, let's see. Any business we need to discuss? Last week, or not last week, but the last episode that I posted Sunday night was all about just the general hysteria of Meghan and Harry. And the two of them just continue to shock me with how much drama they bring into their own lives for no conceivable reason. It feels like they just want to be upset. It just feels like they want to be mad. It just feels like they want to be offended. And even when nothing calls for them to be offended, even when there's absolutely no reason for them to be in distress, they choose distress. And of course, in that episode, we talked all about Meghan crying on the stairs and saying that she's going to quote unquote disappear and that she just needs to stop breathing and that all these problems will go away when she goes away, which is so presumptuous because is she suggesting that nobody ever cared about Harry until she entered the picture? Hardly. It's like the other way around, if anything. So, you know, and we talked at length about how false that whole thing was and how it seemingly they both knew it was false because he didn't jump to attention and call for help, and then somehow she was able to doll herself up and no one was the wiser. That's just not how somebody works who's on the brink of suicide. And I just think it's very offensive to people who have truly struggled with their mental health and really struggled with suicidality that she would almost make a mockery of it. And the book is very unserious about the subject matter because we go straight from, I want to take my own life, I'm on the brink of ending it all and ending the life of our child, to, oh no, somebody has sent a letter to the press and, oh, look, it happens to be the very letter that I sent to my dad. And even though we know that she wrote the letter with the express purpose of it being leaked to the press, that she had worded it with the hope that it would be. So there was lots of drama regarding that, and it just again seemed very insufficient for reason that she would be so upset because she had created the situation and then she wanted to play the victim. So it's a really frustrating section to read because there was just so little in it that made any logical sense for any human being who has functioned in the world for, you know, longer than a year. Very childish behavior and just unseemly for their age. And that's the other thing that always surprises me. Again, I've said it many times, but these are people who were well into their 30s and early 40s. And we're just seeing behavior and attitude that would be better described as that of a fifth grader. So these are not, I mean, this is pretty ridiculous. We today are going to be talking about, of course, the dog bowl incident. We're going to be talking about just continued frustration with the family, continued insistence that everyone is against them, the manipulation in their own minds of incidences that have happened so that they can continue to paint themselves as the victim. It's just so transparent. It's just difficult to understand how they can stand themselves. It just shocks me. I mean, I couldn't stand to live in my head if that was what was going on all the time. All right, so anyway, let's just get into it. All right, like I promised last time, we are starting out with Willie and the dog bowl incident. Now, much has been made about this, and it is absolutely and unequivocally one of the most ridiculous stories I've ever heard from anybody. And Harry's inability to see where he or his wife could have ever made a misstep is the other shocking thing. I don't understand how you get so far in your 30s and you have not learned to accept some even marginal responsibility for the situation around you. It just seems like that's part of maturing as a human being, that you have to admit sometimes when you're wrong, even when it's uncomfortable to have to do so. He doesn't possess the ability. Okay, so Willie comes over. He wants to have a meeting. He wanted to talk about everything. And he said he just wanted it to be Harry and himself. And he didn't want, wives were not to be included. Let's just, brother to brother, let's talk about what in the world's happening because it's gotten out of control. Harry says, luckily, as it happened, Meg was out of town visiting girlfriends, so it worked out. Well, it's like, does she have to be out of town already, like, occupied? You can't just say, hey, I need to go meet with my brother. We need to talk. Like, why is that so convenient? Whether she was in town or not, you should be able to say, hey, I need to meet with William, and it's just going to be us. But I don't think Harry is allowed to tell her what's going to happen in any circumstance. Well, he says that an hour later, William comes in heated, outraged already. So, you know, of course, the implication here is that nothing could have been accomplished because William was already outraged. He says that it was early in the evening and he offered William a drink, you know, and he tried to have a pleasant conversation. Here I was, just trying to be nice, offered him a drink. I suppose his family wouldn't have any of it. But even though Harry asked about William's family, William didn't even have the common decency to ask about his. He just went all in, chips at the center of the table. Meg's difficult, he said. Oh, really? She's rude. She's abrasive. She's alienated half the staff. And he says that, of course, this was just William parroting that media again. The press is just all up in his head, and he can't make any sense of what William is saying. Like, where would William get any of these ideas? I don't know, from being in the family with her? It's like, he doesn't have to rely on the press for some hot take. I mean, he knows the woman. So what, like, that is just such a meager, weak, lame excuse that he got all this stuff from the press. Well, first of all, William doesn't read the press because he's not going to waste his time with a bunch of ratty magazines. He doesn't need to read the press to know that Meg is difficult and rude. He's had multiple conversations with her in which she was difficult and rude. And so for Harry to not be able to connect the dots is, once again, yet another mark against his IQ. Harry says that he told William, you know, I expect better from you. And he says that he was shocked to see that this actually pissed William off. And what Harry couldn't get over was, you know, had William come expecting something different? Did he think that Harry would side with William? And so, you know, there's all this shock and indignation, and Harry can't understand where William's coming from. William can't understand where Harry's coming from. And Harry writes this. I told him to step back, take a breath, really ask himself, wasn't Meg his sister-in-law? Wouldn't this institution be toxic for any newcomer? Worst case scenario, if his sister-in-law was having trouble adjusting to a new office, a new family, a new country, a new culture, couldn't he see his way clear to cutting her some slack? Couldn't you just be there for her? Help her! You know my voice. But it's like, after a while, I can't cut you any more slack. You can't I don't care if something is difficult and hard for you. You don't get through life by saying, oh, this is a learning curve for me, so part of the learning curve includes me being allowed to have fits when I feel like it. Oh, this office and family and country and customs are different. That means I can just treat everybody like trash. And, cut me some slack already. It's hard for me here. It's like, it would have been one thing if she had always been charming, and what Harry was saying was she's messed up a little bit on protocol. She didn't know about this or that, or we didn't brief her. Like, if there was actual documented incidences in which she'd been trying her best, she'd been reading all of the material that had been given to her, she'd been truly briefed, and then something happened or there was some little misstep, that would be one thing. But the problem is, the things people are angry at her with aren't just the little breaches. I mean, the thing is that those incidences have been tagged on, but it's only because they're wanting to add to a variety of other things that have already happened that are a lot more egregious. So they're not really mad about the fact that she got into the car before Granny. If that had been the only thing, if it had been the only misstep, then people probably would have found it sort of charming and funny that she made a little bit of a faux pas, but it wouldn't be anything that people would despise her for. But people despised her because she was mean and unkind. So no, they're not going to cut her slack for being mean and unkind. People cut you slack for when you just genuinely don't know something. They're not going to cut you slack because you're throwing hot tea at people or raging around the office or being short with people or cutting people off. No, you don't. There's no circumstance in which any of that would be acceptable behavior, new or not. You're not rude to people. Well, William's not taking any of that. He doesn't need those sorry excuses. But William, according to Harry, had no interest in debate. He'd come to lay down the law. He wanted me to agree that Meg was wrong and then agree to do something about it. Okay, so then Harry immediately goes to Mr. Put Upon, like, what are you saying? Are you saying that you want me to divorce her? No, William's not saying that. It's just, you need to stop letting her jerk you around by the throat and finally stand up to this person and say, hey, you're being really difficult for people to get along with. Like, stand up to her. She's going to behave this way as long as she can get away with it. Harry, speak to her. You're the closest person to her. Tell her this is not acceptable. But of course, Harry's got to go straight into dramatics. And so Harry says, well, like what? Scold her? Fire her? Divorce her? I didn't know, but Willie didn't know either. He wasn't rational. Every time I tried to slow him down, point out the illogic of what he was saying, he got louder. We were soon talking over each other, both of us shouting. And the thing that shocked Harry so especially was that William seemed so aggrieved about all of this. Harry writes that he seemed put upon that I wasn't meekly obeying him, that I was being so impertinent as to deny him or defy him, to refute his knowledge which came from his trusted aides. It, once again, didn't come from the media or his trusted aides. He's seen it often enough in action that if one of his aides were to come to him and say, sir, X, Y, and Z's just gone down in the office, it isn't a far cry for William to be like, yeah, I know, I'm sure it did, because that's how she acts all the time. It's not like he'd only ever seen this beautiful side to Meghan, and then out of the depths of depravity, somebody drags some trashy story, and then beyond all reasonable understanding, William just bought it hook, line, and sinker. Now, William would have seen this himself before he just believed. All right, but anyway, Harry says that there was a script, and between the two of them, that their lives had always been scripted out. William told Harry what to do, and Harry did it. And that William was shocked at the audacity being displayed, that Harry would not follow the script. He was in the full air mode, and he couldn't fathom why I wasn't dutifully playing the role of the spare. But it's like, if you're translating his shock at you not obeying the role, it's not him being shocked that you won't obey him. It's him being shocked that you can't see that you've married somebody who is a completely manipulative and hateful and spiteful individual who gets off on telling people what to do, who finds joy in overpowering what she considers to be weaker people. Like, his shock didn't come from the fact that you weren't following the script. It came from the fact that you couldn't see the monster you had married. Okay, so Harry says that he was just sitting there on the sofa cowering, and then William was over the top of him. And that it was just this, horrible dynamic of William lording over all the power of the centuries over him. And that Willie, according to Harry, just wouldn't hear him out. He kept, listen to me, Willie, just wait, don't hit me, please. No, please. It's like an absolutely ridiculous scene is being painted for us. He wouldn't listen. He simply would not listen. He says that William called him names, all kinds of names. He said that Harry refused to take responsibility for what was happening. Well, he is refusing to take responsibility for what's happening. William said that I didn't care about my office and the people who worked for me. You don't care about your office and the people who are working for you. You just finished telling us that everybody was just in complete and total meltdown mode. People were lying across their desks, weeping, taking off work because of depression, that people weren't coming into the office on time because it was such a hostile and horrible place to work. But it didn't used to be that way until Meghan came. She was the addition to the office. And now suddenly, without, you cannot put two and two together. Of course William's frustrated beyond belief. You're being boneheaded and stupid. Willie, give me one example. What are you talking about? Don't hit me, but just please tell me what you're talking about. But William cut him off. And William said that he was trying to help Harry. Just stop with the cringing. I'm trying to help you see what you've gotten yourself into. Are you serious? Help me? Sorry, is that what you call help? Standing over me, scaring the bejesus out of me. For some reason, that really set him off. He stepped towards me, swearing. Oh gosh, can you even see William stepping towards anyone swearing? To that point, I'd been feeling, actually, I think I can. He has a commanding presence. But not illogically swearing at somebody. To that point, I'd been feeling uncomfortable. But now I felt a bit scared. I stood, brushed past him, went out into the kitchen to the sink. He was right on my heels, berating me, shouting. Really? I guess Harry's had quite a while of learning to retreat from danger whenever he senses it, because he doesn't have the backbone to stand up. The thing is that he knows that what William is saying is true, but he can't agree with it, because if he agrees with it, then he's going to have to make some life changes. So all he can do is deny, and act like William is the one with the problem. A little trick that he picked up from his wife. So he says he was feeling terrified, and to get away from William, he went to the kitchen to the sink. But here comes William, roaring up after him, shouting, cursing, berating him. He says he poured a glass of water for himself, and he wants to add that he also poured one for William. So, he's just full of life and love. And he handed it to William. But I don't even think he took a sip. How dare him? Willie, I can't speak to you when you're like this. You're a madman. William set down the water, called me another name, and came at me. Well, what are these names, though? Because, Harry, throughout this entire book, has gone on ridiculous tirades against other people, calling them all manner of names. When it comes to the press, he spares no one's feelings. In fact, we'll see another incident in a little bit. So I just find it absolutely ridiculous that he wants us to believe that William was calling him names, and yet he's just he's too kind and decent to tell you what those names were. He won't let those names fall from his lips. You don't have any problem smearing other people, so why won't you just tell us what William said? If William is treating you unkindly, and anybody who's ever treated you unkindly before has gotten the worst treatment from you, why are you suddenly now drying up? Oh, could it be because William didn't actually say anything? Okay, so anyway, listen to this. He set down the water, called me another name, then came at me. It all happened so fast, so very fast. How dramatic. So fast, so very fast. He grabbed me by the collar. ripped my necklace. He knocked me to the floor. I landed on the dog's bowl, which cracked under my back, the pieces cutting into me. I lay there for a moment, dazed, and then got up to my feet and told him, "Get out! Get out!" "Come on, hit me. You'll feel better if you hit me." "Do what?" "Come on. We always used to fight. You'll feel better if you hit me." "No. You'll only feel better if I hit you. Please, just leave." He left the kitchen, but he didn't leave Notcott. He was in the sitting room. I could tell. I stayed in the kitchen. 2 minutes passed. 2 long minutes. He came back looking regretful and apologized. He walked to the front door. This time I followed. Before leaving, he turned and called back, "You don't need to tell Meg about this." "You mean that you attacked me?" "I didn't attack you, Harold." "Fine. I won't tell her." "Good, thank you." He left. I looked at the phone. "And a promise is a promise," I told myself, so I wouldn't call my wife, much as I wanted to. But I needed to talk to someone, so I rang my therapist. Thank God she answered. He says he apologized for the intrusion and told her that he didn't know who else to call. And he told her he'd had a fight with Willie. And William had knocked him to the floor. I looked down and told her that my shirt was ripped. And my necklace was broken. We'd had a million physical fights in our lives. As boys, we'd done nothing but fight. But this felt different somehow. Well, yeah, it is different. Because you made this one up. The therapist told me to take deep breaths. She asked me to describe the scene several times. Each time I did, it seemed more like a bad dream. But he said it made him a bit calmer. And then he says, "I'm proud of myself." Proud, Harry? Why's that? Exactly, the question we're all asking. I didn't hit him back. Probably because you know he could have taken you down. I stayed true to my word. No, I didn't tell Meg. You're just telling the world now. You didn't tell Meg, but, one more thing for the book. But not long after she returned from her trip, she saw me coming out of the shower and gasped, "Haz, what are those scrapes and bruises on your back?" I couldn't lie to her. She wasn't that surprised. And she wasn't at all angry. She was just terribly sad. How noble and how unrealistic. Do any of us believe that Meghan Markle, if she found scratches all down her husband's back from this ye old dog bowl incident, she wouldn't have immediately been on the phone with somebody, calling somebody, texting somebody, outraged, getting on the phone with her girlfriends? "You won't believe what he's done now. Listen to what his older brother did this time." I mean, she wouldn't have just sadly turned from the room. The burden of the royal family's twisted and broken familial relationships heaped on her back. She staggered from the room, unable to walk under the weight of hundreds of years of dysfunction. Please. She would have been howling, and she would have been all up in somebody's business if she thought that her husband had been abused at the hands. Finally, here was some physical, like a physical marking that something, that all was not right. She would have taken pictures. She would have made sure that somebody knew something, which is how I know this whole thing didn't happen. I mean, apart from the fact that none of it rings true. But this is like the final coffin in the story. I mean, please. She had that camera. If she could stop the engagement so that she could take pictures, or whatever the case may be, she's always pulling out her phone for one thing and another. You're going to tell me she wouldn't have pulled out her phone immediately to document the scars and the bruises on her husband's back? If they had really been marks on him, we would have seen it in the Netflix documentary. But like so much of that fabricated nonsense, you know, there's no actual documentation for anything that they say happened, despite the fact they always had their phones out. Soon after this day, it was announced that the Cambridges and the Sussexes wouldn't have an office together any longer. They wouldn't be working together in any capacity. The Fab Four, that's over. And, you know, the public sort of groaned. Journalists had a lot to say. The family, as always, didn't have anything to say back to all of the fomentation that the media was creating. Of course, this is for Harry yet one more mark that his family is just nothing but a horrible group of vipers. It's just a nest of vipers is what it is. He says that everything he'd been taught, everything he'd grown up believing about the family and about the monarchy and about its essential fairness, its job of uniting rather than dividing, was being undermined, called into question. Was it all fake? He asks. Was it all just a show? Because if we couldn't stand up for one another and rally around our newest member, our first biracial member, then what were we really? What was a true constitutional monarchy? Was this a real family? Isn't defending each other the first rule of every family? No, it isn't. That's the first rule of any enabler. You don't need to defend somebody when they treat you incorrectly and when they manipulate you and abuse you emotionally, mentally. No, you don't need to rally around people who are having a bad attitude. So he's over there licking his wounds. And that line right there. Why aren't we rallying around our newest, our first biracial member? Well, so she gets extra rallying. She should be especially rallied around because of her race. I never did understand why everybody made such a big deal about her coloration. I mean, it's like, so what? That's like the least interesting thing about her. You know, it's like, what sort of person is she? And I do not think that I'm the only one who didn't even know that she was black in the first place. Like, until she said it, I was like, oh, okay, that's news. But she wasn't picked for her skin color or despised because of it. It was like a non-issue. To every thinking human being, it was a non-issue. She's the one that made it an issue. She's the one that wanted to gain, societal points for the color of her skin. What an archaic thing to try to get points for. You know, I mean, like, who cares? Who cares about the color of your skin? Not a single person and not a single thinking person cares. That's nothing to do with the sort of person that you are. And you didn't choose the color of your skin, so you can't gain or lose points because of something that had nothing to do with you. There's no righteousness incurred upon you because of the melanin in your skin or the lack of it, please. All right. Let's see. Here, Harry writes that finally they were able to move into their new home. Frogmore was ready. They absolutely loved the place. They get to see their favorite swan, Grumpy Steve. He makes so many appearances. I mean, it's like as if this book wasn't already just a hodgepodge of non-stories. The fact that Grumpy Steve the Swan has made now his third appearance is such an indication about the scholastic virtue of this book. Anyway, he says that about this time they got a new head of communication. Her name was Sarah. And they were going to plot a new strategy with her, the centerpiece of which was having nothing whatsoever to do with the Royal Rota. Remember how much he disdains them. And they hoped that they might soon be able to make a fresh start. He says that towards the end of 2019, April 2019, Meg was due to give birth. At the same time, he received a call from William. Apparently something had happened between Paul and Camilla. Harry says he couldn't get the whole story because William was talking too fast and he was so upset. Then he was seething, actually. So, I mean, to hear it told, William goes outraged with anger and indignation from one household to the next, just an absolute whirlwind of fury. And he Harry says that he managed to gather through William's spitting rage that Pa and Camilla's people had planted a story or stories about him and Kate and the kids. And he wasn't going to take it anymore. You know, if you give Pa and Camilla an inch, they're going to take a mile. I just don't think William talks this way about his father or Camilla. Harry claims that William said, "They've done this to me for the last time." You know, the age-old gripe that he's had this whole time, that Pa and Camilla would constantly try to get good press on the backs of their sons. So they would, according to Harry, the hateful campaign spin doctor, would plant stories against Harry and William, and then Camilla and Pa would then reap the benefit by putting out a positive story about themselves. So it would always seem like, oh, these troubled boys and their troubled wives, and, you know, Duchess Doolittle and Lazy William, or whatever their little name for him was. And then, of course, you know, Harry and Meghan easily stirred up their own bad press. So really nobody had to plant any special stories about them. But apparently this happened a lot to William, and he was just over it. And even Harry says that it was happening a lot more to William than it was to Harry and Meghan, which is shocking that he would admit it. And, you know, there are tales in the press about attacks on attacks on William and on Catherine. Maybe it was somebody in the comments who said something about the fact that, you know, the press has since come out and said that they did try to do hit pieces on William and Catherine. They could never get a good picture of Catherine, and so, you know, to be spiteful, they wrote ugly things about her. So William goes to Pa, according to Harry, and tried to confront Pa about the fact that Pa was in league with somebody who was constantly planting stories against his own sons. And William says to Pa, "How can you be letting a stranger do this to your own sons?" And apparently, now it's Pa's turn to fly into a spitting rage. Pa instantly got upset. He began shouting that Willie was paranoid. We both were. Just because we were getting bad press and he was getting good, that didn't mean his staff was behind it. Pa refused to listen. His response was churlish, pathetic. Well, Harry claims that Pa said, "Granny has her person, why can't I have mine?" When finally they backed him into a corner and he admitted that he had somebody planting stories. By Granny's person, he meant Angela. Among the many services she performed for Granny, she was said to be skilled at planting stories. But Pa just kept saying over and over again, when Willie said, "That's rubbish. What are you talking about?" Pa just kept with this pathetic refrain. "Granny has her person. Granny has her person. High time he had his person too." So here William and Harry are coming, trying to confront Pa. Harry is feeling all sorts of closeness to William in this moment because right now they have a joint enemy. It's no longer the two of them against Meghan. Now they can just go after Pa tooth and nail. And just at the height of his closeness, as they come at Pa with spear and pitchfork, Harry comes in with, "Yeah, see what Pa and Camilla have done to you in the press? Well, now you know how it feels for me and Meghan. See, we have that problem too, and it's the press is always against us, and now you know how it feels." And then apparently William rounds on Harry and says, "I've got different issues with you two." So all of that brotherly love, you know, that connection that they had of attacking Pa at once, that was all obliterated. In a blink, he shifted all his rage onto me. I can't recall his exact words because I was beyond tired from all our fighting, to say nothing of the recent moving into Frogmore and the new offices. I was focused on the imminent birth of our first child. But I recall every physical detail of the room. We don't care about the physical details of the room. The fact that the window was open and the white curtains were blowing in. Who cares? Put your mind to something useful. Don't write a book and tell us about the table was laid with crystal and glass. Who cares? Of course it was. What are you talking about? Now, let's get on to the matter. What was said? What was the argument? Well, I can't remember what the argument was about. I can't remember the details of what we said. I don't even know what we were in there for. But I do remember the curtains blowing around. He goes home. He says he remembers Meg coming from the house directly toward him. Tears were glistening in her eyes. He says, there were tears in her eyes glistening in the spring sunshine. Ridiculousness. I started to say something, but she stopped, shook her head, Holding her stomach, she turned and walked back into the house. This is such bad writing. What is this? I looked at her, tears glinting her eyes in the spring sunshine. She looked at me, shook her head. Then, holding her stomach, she turned and waddled back into the house. I mean, it's laughable. And now they decide to tell us all about when she gave birth. Now, of course, they didn't want the press to have anything to do with it. Although, historically, when one has a baby, the press is informed of the event. They were not interested in letting those horrible hounds of hell into their private moment. Meg was a week past her due date. The press kept wanting to know, when's the baby coming, when's the baby coming? And Harry was like, oh, the press is frustrated. Oh, how hard for them. Heaven forbid it. Meg's doctor had tried several homeopathic ways to get things moving, but the little baby just didn't want to come. Probably he knew what world he was coming into. So after trying to induce labor, they couldn't get anything started. They decided that they would just go in and see the doctor. Maybe the doctor could give them, a little bit of more advice. He says that they got into a nondescript people carrier, I don't know what that is, and crept away from Frogmore without alerting any of the journalists stationed at the gates. It was the last sort of vehicle they'd expect that we'd be riding in. A short time later, we arrived at the Portland Hospital and were spirited into a secret lift and then into a private room. Our doctors walked in, talked it through with us, and said it was time to induce. Meg was so calm. I was calm too. But I saw two ways of enhancing my calm. One, Nando's chicken, bought by our bodyguards. Two, a canister of laughing gas beside Meg's bed. I took several slow, penetrating hits. Meg bouncing on a giant purple ball, a proven way of giving nature a push, laughed and rolled her eyes. That's what makes me know she wasn't in labor. No one's laughing and rolling their eyes while your husband is stuffing his face with Nando's chicken and taking all the laughing gas which was meant for you. Anyway, he's over there just taking hit after hit between the bites of chicken. Her contractions begin to quicken and deepen. A nurse comes in to give Meg some laughing gas, but there's none left. I mean, what is this admission of tomfoolery? Can you imagine having that clown in the corner chewing on a chicken leg, taking all the gas? Can you imagine? I mean, like, when you are in the throes of labor, you can barely concentrate on breathing, let alone having some fool in the corner sucking the grease off his fingers and giggling into his handkerchief. All right, so the nurse looked at the tank and then looked at me, and I could see the thought slowly dawning. Gracious, the husband's had it all. Sorry, I said meekly. Meg laughed. Again, with the laughing. Who's laughing when you are at the point of contractions where you're needing some sort of intervention? No one's cackling and laughing at the funny little clown in the corner. What the hell? You took all the gas? Meg laughed, the nurse laughed, and quickly changed the canister. I hope it was charged for the canister that he took. Meg climbed into a bath. I turned on soothing music. Okay, apparently she wanted to listen to this individual called Diva Premal. She remixed Sanskrit mantras into soulful hymns. Premal claimed that she heard her first mantra in the womb, chanted by her father, and when he was dying, she chanted the same mantra to him. Powerful stuff. If you were high on laughing gas, you'd buy that. He writes that in their overnight bag, they had some electric candles that he'd arranged in the garden the night they proposed. They still had those clunky things. He put them around the hospital room, and he also set a framed photo of his mother on a little table by Meg's head, which he says was Meg's idea. You guys, can you even? I just don't know. I mean, my own mother had passed away before I had any of my kids. And I am not an unsentimental person, but it never even dawned on me to get a framed photograph of my mother to make sure was on the bedside table. when I gave birth. I mean, as much as I would want her there, like, it would only make me sadder that, like, the best I can do is this picture on the bedside table, but she's missing this moment in my life. I have 3 kids. Not for any of their births was they like, oh, and into my overnight bag, I need to make sure that I put a picture of my mom. Now, if any of you all did that, okay, that's fine. I'm not trying to mock, maybe that was sentimental and special for you. But, like, I think it's just because Harry can't ever let go of the idea of his mom that I find this definite overkill. But I guess it's better than him, putting a box of hair next to the bed. Anyway, Meg's in a lot of pain. She's breathing deeply, but the breathing exercises stop working. Well, I mean, the breathing exercises aren't going to stop the pain. It'd help you get through it. But she needed an epidural. So an anesthesiologist comes in. Harry writes, off went the music, on went the lights. Whoa, vibe change. What a grating statement. Whoa, vibe change. He gave her an injection at the base of her spine. Still, the pain didn't let up. The medicine apparently wasn't getting where it needed to go. Even the epidural was against her. Doctor comes back, gives her another one. Can you have more than one epidural? I guess you can. I don't know. I didn't have any. After that, things started working. He writes that the doctor came back 2 hours later, slipped both hands into a pair of rubber gloves. This is it, everybody. I stationed myself at the head of the bed, holding Meg's hand, encouraging her. Push, love, breathe. The doctor gave Meg a small hand mirror. I tried not to look, but I had to. Wait, what? Okay, when I was in the throes of labor, pushing a child out, you could have, I couldn't have held a hand mirror or positioned it so I could have seen anything. What is he talking? What doctor's being, okay, hold this mirror while you shove this baby out? Doesn't, like, I was too weak. My legs were shaking so bad from the pain. I couldn't have held anything, let alone a mirror positioned down there so I could see the crowning of the baby. I mean, I just have to believe it's happening. I don't need to see it. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have wanted to see it. I couldn't have pushed any if I was actually looking at what was happening down there. The doctor gave Meg a small hand mirror. I tried not to look, but I had to. I glanced and I saw a reflection of the baby's head emerging. Stuck. Tangled. What an odd word to use. Tangled in what? Oh no. Please, no. The doctor looked up. Her mouth set in a particular way. Things were getting serious. I said to Meg, oh, right. Tangled. Oh, and the umbilical cord. Sorry. Duh. I said to Meg, my love, I need you to push. She's got a doctor there. And by the way, you can't just be pushing willy-nilly. You better be pushing with a contraction. You're going to tear yourself from stem to stern. I didn't tell her why. I didn't tell her about the cord. I didn't tell her about the likelihood of an emergency C-section. The baby's right there. I don't think you need an emergency C-section. I just said, give me everything you got. And she did. I saw the little face, the tiny neck and chest and arms wriggling and writhing. Life, amazing. I thought, wow, it really all begins with a struggle for freedom. This guy cannot get off the narrative. A nurse swept the baby with a towel, places the baby on Meg's chest. Their special doctor had advised them that in the first minute of life, a baby absorbs everything said to them. So whisper to the baby. Tell the baby you're for him. Your love. Tell. We told. He says he didn't remember phoning anyone or texting them. And I think that that's so sad. You just had a baby and you're so cut off from your family that you don't recall phoning anybody or texting anybody. It was just you and Meg in the hospital alone. And then, okay, like on the one hand, I didn't want a whole crowd in the room when I was giving birth. I only wanted my husband. I didn't want my sisters. I didn't want any mother-in-laws. I didn't want any aunts, nobody. Y'all can wait in the waiting room, and when the baby's here, you can come see. The only person I wanted was my husband. This was a moment between him and I. And I mean, I don't need a crowd at the end of the bed. But as soon as that baby was born, I wanted to celebrate. I wanted everybody to know. I wanted to send pictures. If anybody was in the waiting room, please come in, see the baby. Like, how sad that you would have this beautiful moment, your first baby, and you would just be at such odds with everybody that you wouldn't even phone or text. Boy, she has really done a number. Done a number. So he says that their nurses ran some tests on his hour-old son, and then they were out of there. I mean, they didn't even spend the night. Into the lift, into the underground car park, into the people carrier, and gone. Within 2 hours of our son being born, we were back at Frogmore. The sun had risen, and we were behind closed doors before the official announcement was released. That's also very suspicious. Would they release you 2 hours after having the baby? Maybe they do things differently in England. Do you have the choice to go home that quickly? Usually they want to just make sure everything's okay. Like, just at least have you stay overnight. Just make sure, you know what you're doing in the nursing department and all this. I mean, if you're choosing to nurse, maybe she wasn't choosing to nurse. Oh, look, okay, I know, I see the comments. I know there's all this conspiracy about, did she even have the babies? Was there a surrogate and she had a fake baby bump? I don't know about all that. I've never gone down the rabbit hole of that particular conspiracy. And it seems such like a wild thing, but crazier things have happened. So I know that this video is going to get lots and lots of comments of, she wasn't even really pregnant. Oh, how do you believe this? Oh, that was also fake. You feel free to leave those comments. You all know more about the subject than I do, but I do want to just remind you that I'm only reading this book based on what he's telling us. But even what he's telling me, I'm like, you really haven't experienced someone giving birth, have you? Anyway, they get back to Frogmore within 2 hours of having had the baby. And he says they immediately already had a tiff with Sarah, their comms girl, because she said that she writes to him and says, oh, has Meg gone into labor? Has she? She's already had the baby. And Harry says, look, I told you she's not in labor anymore. And Sarah was disappointed because she's like, look, but the press wants this dramatic lead up and a suspenseful story. They demand it, and you're wrecking that. You could have at least told us that she was in labor. You could have at least given us that little bit of excitement. And Harry's like, I'm not giving them anything. So he's like, I'm not gonna lie and say that she's in labor now when I know full well she's back in the house with the kid. And so Sarah's kind of hoping that he'll, release something. Oh, she's in labor, and then, oh, she had the baby, and, all post the event. But basically, Sarah was of the mind, let's keep people tuned into this show, and he didn't care. And anyway, after a few hours, he was standing outside the stables at Windsor telling the world, oh, it's a boy. Days later, we announced the name to the world, Archie. The papers were incensed, because they said that Harry and Meghan had pulled a fast one on them. Indeed, we had. They felt that in doing so, Harry and Meghan had been bad partners. Astonishing. Did they still think of us as partners? Did they really expect special consideration, preferential treatment, given how they treated us these last 3 years? And then they showed the world what kind of partners they really were. A BBC radio presenter posted a photo on his social media. A man and a woman holding hands with a chimpanzee. And the caption read, Royal baby leaves hospital. Okay, but you aren't partners with them. They've always been your arch nemesis. Except second only to William. Are you really shocked that they would do something like this, since you say they're so hateful anyway? Like, why are you continually shocked by these people who you say are your persecutors? We're roaring up on that hour. Let's see. We might have time for one more story. This isn't where I plan. Lately, I plan for these huge swaths of reading, like I'm really going to get to it all. The next section is him giving a long litany about Granny's 3 press. I don't exactly know what they are. He has some colorful descriptions of them. They're basically these 3 courtiers that he is forced to deal with on a continual basis, and he has some ugly names for them. He says that he had gone to see Granny at Balmoral, and while he was there, he gave her yet one more coma-inducing recounting of the press is against us story. So Granny's, I mean, how many times has a poor woman had to listen to this? It probably would usher into an untimely death. She's shocked. Yeah, right. She's shocked because she can't believe that you're continually crying about the same issue. Shocked nothing. She's not over there being like, the press really said that. It's more like, you're still mad about that? Anyway, she's shocked. She's appalled, he says. I mean, if she's shocked at anything, she's shocked at your deteriorating mental state. Anyway, she vowed to send the bee to talk to them. Now, the bee is a part of this unholy trinity of courtiers in which he's constantly forced to deal with. He says that he'd spent his life dealing with courtiers, scores of them, but now he had to deal with mostly with just 3. They were all middle-aged white guys who'd managed to consolidate power through a series of bold Machiavellian maneuvers. They had normal names, exceedingly British, but they sort more easily into zoological categories. So there was the bee, the fly, and the wasp. And he goes on to describe these people in his typically lurid terms. He says the bee was oval-faced and fuzzy, tended to glide around with great equanimity and poise. But if you thought you could trust him, that was a big mistake. He said the fly had spent much of his career adjacent to and drawn to shit. The offal of government and media, the wormy entrails, he loved it, grew fat on it, rubbed his hands in glee over it, though he pretended otherwise. He gave off an air of casualness, but again, don't be tricked. And then there was the wasp, who was lanky and charming and arrogant, a ball of jazzy energy. He was great at pretending to be polite, even servile, but he had this real annoying habit of always undermining your factual statements. So you'd say something that was clear as day, and he'd come at you with, oh, well, I don't know about that, Your Royal Highness. You see, it all depends on what you mean by, and then he tried to redefine something you just said. So the thing that was annoying about him was he was just so slick. He was weedy and self-effacing. You might be tempted to push back and insist on your point, and that's when he'd, stab you with his stinger. You never knew where the world he came from. Anyway, Harry had always disliked these people, but the real problem was, and now listen to this. He says, deep down, I fear that each man felt himself to be the one true monarch, that each was taking advantage of a queen in her 90s, enjoying his influential position while merely appearing to serve. So what are you saying, Harry? That she is incapable? That she is, feeble in her mental capacities, and that she is too dim-witted to see that these 3 smooth talkers are trying to wrestle the monarchy from her, aged fingers? Please. Harry, if anybody should be concerned about learning how to hold on to what's his, it should be you. The Queen's got no problem in that department. Anyway, his problem was that he had already talked with the Wasp before about the press situation. And the Wasp had pretended to care, but then of course they hadn't heard from him again. So now the bee is being sent round to Frogmore, and the thing that was so shattering about the whole incident was that he came into their comfortable new sitting room. They offered him a glass of rosé. I gave him a detailed presentation. They probably had a PowerPoint and everything. He took meticulous notes, frequently putting a hand over his mouth and shaking his head. He'd seen the headlines, he said, but he'd not appreciated the full impact this might have on a young couple. This deluge of hate and lies was unprecedented in British history, he said. Disproportionate to anything I've ever seen, he said. Thank you, we said. Thank you for seeing it. Meg's favorite line. Thank you for asking. No one's really asked before. Anyway, he says he promised to discuss the matter with the necessary parties, but then wouldn't you believe it, they never heard from him again. Don't you kind of imagine the guy was just like epically trolling them the entire time, sipping his rosé, shaking his head and acting like he was shocked, but I mean, he had no intention of doing anything. I mean, that would have been me. I wouldn't have had any intention to do anything for those sorry people who were complaining about all of how terrible life was as they sat in their sumptuous living room. All right, that's the end of that. That's all we have time for tonight. But thank you for, if you made it this far with this gravelly voice, completely ruined my hairy voice. Oh, what a tragedy. It's the one thing I have to offer you. Anyway, if you made it this far, congratulations. You are stronger than most. And I guess I will put out another video later this week if I have time, and I should have time. Let's see, is there anything else left to say? I don't think so. I'll see you guys later. Have a good rest of your day or night or whenever you are watching this. Have a lovely rest of whatever. Bye.